You're watching The Attorneys, a paid advertisement brought to you by the law firm of Hollis, Wright.
Car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with The Attorneys of Hollis Wright.
Thanks for joining us. You are watching The Attorneys, and you know, it can happen anywhere. You're just going about your day, a grocery store, an apartment complex, a parking lot, and then an unsafe condition causes you to have a problem. Who's responsible? We're going to be talking about premises liability. That's one thing. We're going to break it all down for you because that's what we do here on The Attorneys. Also, standing by right now, our lawyers for Hollis Wright. They're taking your call at 1-844-LAW-TALK. It's a free call, it's a confidential call, and they'll be there throughout the show. I'm Mark Franklin, your host, along with my guy here, Josh. Good to see you, buddy. It's been a minute.
By the way, that is an intro. Like, that's the professional intro right there. And that's what we're going to be talking about,
exactly.
though. Like, you actually listed to start how premises liability can develop in the legal world, because it's not just something that you would consider, which is someone slipped and fell at an apartment complex or a grocery store. It could be as simple as a condition on a person's hunting property, a condition in a parking lot, a condition in a parking deck of an apartment complex. You can find these premises claims and dangerous conditions that need to be evaluated in cases that need to be evaluated in a whole host of areas.
Yeah.
We're really lucky today because
Absolutely.
we've got Jake Norwood on, and Jake is not only an expert in this area, but a young, thriving lawyer that's doing his thing in the plaintiff world, started on the defense side and has made his way over to Turnbull, Moak, and Pendergrass. And first of all, we're glad to have you on. And I'm super glad to have you on this side of the bar.
Yes, sir. Well, listen, I have to confess, I worked with Josh when I was still in law school.
Yeah.
And many law students are broke. And so I was happy to work for Josh. But most of all, I was happy to work for Josh because I learned a ton.
Yeah.
And it has served me well. And I'm really excited to talk about my third favorite thing, which is the practice of law. First favorite thing, God. Second, family. Third, right here, the practice of law.
That's it. Good. I like that order, too.
That's right, yeah.
And not only did Jake used to work with us years ago as a clerk when he was going through law school, but then I worked against him where he was on a case against me for a period of time where he used all the tricks of the trade
you trained him,
against us. I remember in the middle of a deposition thinking, oh my God, I trained this guy. He is so good. I was like, this is going in a good direction.
Yeah, I felt a little bad,
Yeah,
but
that's the way it works.
I mean, you set me loose.
That's
so.
right. That's right. All right, let's unwrap this topic. It is much broader than what people think. When you hear premises liability, the first thing someone thinks about is, well, these are only claims where somebody, had an event at a grocery store and slipped and fell and they were injured. And certainly it could include that, but it's a very broad topic that impacts your practice.
Absolutely. So I think that, and that slip and fall in the grocery store is something that a lot of us are familiar with, right? And we've all been at the big box store and seen the, water on the ground by the groceries, by the, the cold food section. We've seen the, barbecue sauce in the aisle. Those kind of things happen, right? And people slip on those things. But the reality is that we don't need to narrow our focus when we talk about premises liability. It can be, there are a lot of dangerous conditions. You can find it in a grocery store, but also, like you said, I'll give you an example. There was a gentleman on a hunting property, and he was paying to be there, right? He was a member of a hunting club, and there was a area that they would go across on four-wheelers all the time, and it had sinkholes. And the owners of the property knew that sinkholes were there. And the owners of the property did not tell their members about those sinkholes. There's falling merchandise from a top shelf. There's dangerous animals. There is poorly lit stairways, things like that. Apartment complexes cutting their lights off after sundown when they know their tenants might work the night shift, things like that. Yeah. So there are conditions that we are not trained or prepared to look for as lay people that attorneys have seen over and over that are equally dangerous and equally need to be, investigated to make sure those things don't happen.
Do you see a lot, because we see this, Jake, we see circumstances where commercial groups, whether it's apartment complexes, condominium complexes, building groups that are building properties, they may not meet code related to certain things like a railing height, where someone is anticipating there's going to be a railing somewhere, they fall 2 stories, end up having a catastrophic injury, and it comes back to the fact that it was below the applicable standard that was required by code to have something to protect them. Do you see that stuff?
Absolutely. And we start, you mentioned like buildings under construction or things like that, and we start to get into the areas of OSHA and safe working environments, but even in places where there are customers, there are tenants, there are situations where companies, corporate groups, property owners don't stop and say, it is worth it for us to protect the people that are going to be in this property, and they don't comply with the codes, and every municipality might be different, states are different, and that's the kind of thing, Josh, that attorneys are so trained and honed to be looking for. Obviously, I'm not in broadcasting. I don't expect, Art doesn't expect me to know all the ins and outs of TV production.
I expect you to know everything.
That's right. So I don't think it's reasonable that we expect our average common person to understand, well, this railing needs to be 28 inches tall, or the lighting needs to be at this level of lumens, or things like that. That's beyond what we're expected to understand.
Jake makes this premises liability sound so exciting. I have so many questions when I listen to you. I want to know, is there a legal definition of a dangerous or unsafe condition? Is it only applying to businesses? There's so much to unpack with this, but let's go with the definition. Is there a legal definition, or is it all over the place?
So when we talk about civil law, right? So dangerous condition, yes, I could give you what's called the Black Book dictionary definition, but instead of doing that, I'm gonna use the terms that we use every day, which is unreasonably dangerous condition is something that a business owner or property management company or whoever owns the property has a condition on their property that a similar or the same type of business would not allow to be on their property, that can put their tenants or customers or social friends in danger.
Yeah, and a lot of this, Art, does depend on what category or really what circumstance you're in, whether you are there to benefit the property owner, whether you are there as a social guest, whether you are there as a trespasser. We could do an entire show on trespassing, because when you hear the word trespassing, you think, well, that person's not supposed to be that. Trespassing can happen in circumstances where someone doesn't even have knowledge that they're trespassing. They had no idea they're on a piece of property they weren't supposed to be on, and can have injury, and that injury is evaluated under different circumstances. So let's unwrap just a little bit. We're about to go to break, but I want to unwrap when we get back from break. Let's unwrap how the different categories matter and what duty a property owner would have based on the category that they're in, whether they're a social guest, whether they're an invitee. Let's work through that, because obviously that's one of the first things you look at to evaluate whether or not you can present a claim or not.
Super important.
All right, well, we are off to an amazing start. We're talking about premises liability. Jake just got started. We've got still a lot to unpack, but we also want to remind you, we've got a lot of great stuff on social media. All you have to do is follow all of Hollis Wright's social media platforms, whether it's Instagram, whether it's X or Facebook. You've got some great information, and you can get it all week long, 24 hours a day. Also, attorneys standing by right now to take your call. 1-844-LAW, talk free, confidential. We'll take a break, premises liability. When we come back, you're watching The Attorneys.
Here's some good information from our firm to you. Hollis Wright recently launched the Law Talk podcast. With podcasts becoming so popular, this will be a simple way to provide our loyal viewers with more opportunities to access information about important legal topics and to learn more about our firm and how we can help you if the need ever arises. There are many ways to access the Law Talk podcast. You can simply scan the QR code on your screen. Also, episodes are always available on the Hollis Wright YouTube channel, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your podcasts. Just search up Hollis Wright in the Law Talk podcast. Don't wait, take advantage and listen today. Thanks for watching The Attorneys, and we know you'll enjoy the Law Talk podcast.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas, such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law, such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
Addiction kills hope.
But at Bradford, it all changes here.
Experience the difference
that proven treatment can make.
Find recovery. Find community.
at Bradford.
You're watching The Attorneys, a paid advertisement brought to you by the law firm of Hollis Wright.
And welcome back. You are watching The Attorneys. Also want to remind you that there's a QR code that you can scan on your screen as well. That QR code will also get you to someone at Hollis Wright. We want to get right back to this because it's such a fascinating topic and it involves so much. And you teed it up before we went to break.
Yeah, and I think the key to evaluating these cases from a lawyer's perspective for a client when a client comes in, Jake, is determining initially what status the person had on the premises. And it sounds like status would be super easy. The reality is sometimes it is a little complicated to determine what status someone falls in because the case will be evaluated based on that. And sometimes you can make arguments. We've had them in our law firm where we have lawyers taking alternative views that you could make an argument that a person falls under a trespassing status versus they fall under a licensee status. We're going to unwrap that in a second. But it's complicated sometimes, but it's critically important for lawyers. So let's unwrap that just a bit and kind of explain what the various categories are and how that matters.
Absolutely. So that status you're talking about, that is what determines the level of duty that the property owner owes you. And when we talk about duty, we mean the responsibilities that they take on to have you on their property. So we'll start at the lowest level, because it's the easiest to explain. Trespasser. You mentioned this earlier. There are circumstances where someone may be a trespasser and not know it, but ultimately a trespasser is what it sounds like. Yeah. And the duty owed by a property owner to a trespasser is to not willfully or wantonly hurt them. Yeah. Essentially, that looks like the famous no booby traps case. Yeah. We can't have dangerous conditions that are concealed from trespassers to trap them or stop them. The statuses that we see more often are invitee and licensee. A licensee, confusingly enough, is somebody usually that's invited to your property that does not benefit you financially in some way. So a social guest is a licensee. And a licensee is owed, essentially you owe them a duty to not, to warn them about a danger that is concealed. Right, so a good example might be, let's say that hunting lodge we talked about earlier. If the person that was on that property was not paying to be there, was just a buddy that was going down there to hunt for a weekend, the property owner would have owed that person a duty. Hey, heads up. Yeah. There's some sinkholes out in that field. Watch out if you're driving across on your four-wheeler, something like that. And then the one we see the most often, right, is the invitee. And this is somebody that benefits the owner of the property financially in some way. So that's a customer, that's a tenant, that can fall into any number of categories. It can even be somebody that is there to, do work on your property if it will benefit you, right?
Is it an invited guest to a party?
So, invitee, you think, yeah, invited guests, but they're not there to benefit you financially. So that's exactly, only lawyers can mix their words up to make things more confusing.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. That's why we're here to answer these questions.
And let me give you an example, though, and this is something that we have debated internally over many years. Let's take an example of someone who's a resident on a apartment complex. The resident may fall into one category because they are financially benefiting the owner of the property, yet the moving company that is moving that person into the facility, who is invited by the tenant, may fall into another category. And you've got to evaluate from a premises perspective whether or not someone falls into an invitee category where the property owner has the heightened standard to protect and warn you of dangers, versus falling into the middle category that Jake talked about, which is a licensee where they have a little less of a burden to give you a heads up, right? And so my only point there is, the reason you go to a lawyer in cases like this is not that you can't evaluate, hey, I was injured because, the homeowner did not have something to code, or, the property owner did not tell me about an issue on their property. That's not the issue. You can determine whether or not you have been injured or not. The problem that Jake and I help resolve for people is how your status impacts what duties owed. Because ultimately, success is based on whether you can prove someone violated a duty.
So would I have it right if I said, so your rights depends on your reason for being there?
I think that's a great point, yeah.
Just listening to you guys.
Yeah, that's right. You're getting it.
Yeah.
Art, by the way, is a de facto lawyer, and slowly, each show we do, he gets better and better and better.
The longest law school tenure.
When you
of
sit
all
next
time.
to Josh,
Yeah.
you pick up a little bit of
Right.
Yeah.
But
You're right.
tell me this, I know you've seen some crazy cases of circumstances, because people, again, they think that this category is based on someone falling and injuring themselves, but boy, it is so much broader than that. Just talk about that for a minute.
Definitely. And to your point earlier, lawyers serve a purpose in those bizarre cases, because we got a call essentially where a gentleman was at a store.
This is great.
Okay.
A gentleman was at a store, and he was in the garden section. It was outdoor, indoor, covered area, and he reached down in between, onto a pallet of potted plants, pulled one up, and got bit by a venomous snake, which you don't expect to happen at a big box store, obviously.
No.
And somebody told him to call. We talked with him for a while, and he said, well, look, there's no way they could have known, right? So we start to investigate the claim, and we reach out to the store, and come to find out, they had been told by multiple customers, hey, there are snakes over around these plants. There's a lot of snakes. There's multiple snakes. And they had not taken any steps, right, to move those pallets, clear those snakes out. Ultimately, that company owed that person, right, a duty, because he was there for their benefit, to buy their products, to make them money. And, sometimes normal circumstances or bizarre circumstances like that, where we might say, well, nobody's at fault, right? There's nobody to blame. That store knew those snakes were there, and they didn't do anything about it.
Yeah. I'll give you another great example that will hit home, that shows you how broad this topic is and how duty matters so much. The difference between someone playing golf at a country club and someone playing golf at a location where they are paying for their round at a public course. They may have a different status under both circumstances, but think of this. They market to you that they have a warning system for lightning and bad weather, even have apps that help you do that, and yet they're aware that the warning system is down and don't disclose anything, and the golfer stays out on the golf course and is injured through a storm, lightning, whatever, because they didn't see it coming, or they didn't know it was coming, because sometimes you can be under normal circumstances, all of a sudden lightning comes. Well, these systems pick that up. That is an example of negligence, but also an example of premises liability, and how lawyers have to evaluate those cases to determine whether or not that person has a certain status and whether or not there was a violation of the premises laws that could have impacted the individual. So you can see it in a lot of different categories. A lot more to unwrap when we come back. I want to talk a little bit about negligent security, because that's also a huge component here. And what Jake's going to tell us is the percentages of those cases out there are on the rise for a number of reasons, but how to evaluate those cases is critical.
Well, he's going to tell us that and more. You heard the golfing story from Josh. You heard Jake talk about the snake story. That's why you watch The Attorneys. That's exactly why, because you get information on how to deal with situations like that. In this case, we're talking about premises liability. You've got one more opportunity for the next few minutes to get in contact with a lawyer at Hollis Wright. Call 1-844-LAW-TALK. 1-844-LAW-TALK. It's free. It's confidential. You can do it now. We'll be back talking premises liability on The Attorneys right after this.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon.
Addiction kills hope.
But at Bradford, it all changes here.
Experience the difference
that proven treatment can make.
Find recovery. Find community.
at Bradford.
You're watching The Attorneys, a paid advertisement brought to you by the law firm of Hollis Wright.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. We are discussing premises liability with Jake, and I'm telling you, I'm so fascinated. I'm learning so much by being here.
Well, you know, it's a very broad topic. One of the things I want to talk about is I know that negligent security cases are on the rise, and I didn't even need to see that statistic in the material that you put together for kind of our production of the show, Jake, because I see those cases coming in more every year, and so I'm just trying to understand a little bit about kind of what is that area of the law and why do you think they are on the rise?
Yeah, so, you know, we've got these intentional torts that are, you know, their own body of law. Those are things like assault, you know, intentional acts by a third party, you know, to harm somebody. And then we've got our premises cases like we've been talking about, these slips and falls, these injuries on somebody's property. Negligent security is kind of this marriage between these two types of claims. You know, in 2025, 2026, we're seeing a rise around 22% in negligent security cases. And what a negligent security case is essentially a business or property owner or property management group knows that their, you know, property is unsafe for their patrons because of violent crime, because of sex trafficking, terrible things like that. And they don't do anything to make their property more safe, right? And those are things like lighting, security guards, adequate surveillance, you know, things like cameras. And, you know, generally the company can be liable if they know or should have known that these things were going on their property.
And that's the key, because the key there is, you know, whether or not there had been similar type events, and they have to be substantially similar, but similar type events on the premises. And that is a way that you can hold the premises owner responsible under the circumstance. Because generally there is a defense, there are a couple defenses in these cases, one of which is intentional conduct. So the criminal conduct or intentional conduct of a third party generally is not imputed to a property owner unless you can prove certain things. It is a reason why you get lawyers involved to evaluate these cases. We're evaluating a case right now, and I know Jake will understand this, where the city came into a bar and establishment and said, you've had so many negative events. For you to keep your license and permit to have a business in the city, you are responsible for having security guards at your front and back entrance, and also to wand people in to determine whether or not they have guns, knives, or bad stuff on them, right? Metal on them. And so when they don't comply with that, they violate their own requirements, and that can fall into the circumstance of a negligent security case. Talk a little bit about the defenses, because you don't win every one of these cases, obviously. Yeah. And in negligence cases, we talk a lot on this show about contributory negligence and other defenses to negligence, but there are some defenses to premises cases too. And can you kind of unwrap and explain how that happens in practice?
Absolutely. So there are some specific defenses in cases like this, and this also goes to, every business is not dangerous. Yeah. There are mom and pop shops that they want to make their, business safe for their customers. And they might be asking, watching the show right now, hey, how do we make our business safe? How do we make sure that people are protected? Some of these defenses kind of go hand in hand with that discussion, but those defenses, one of the biggest ones we see is something called open and obvious dangers, right? Or an open and obvious condition. And a good example of that would be, let's say there is neon pink brake fluid on the ground in front of you. It's only been there for a few minutes. You can see it on a white floor. It's open and obvious. It's well lit. It's in the middle of the aisle, and somebody might be going to grab a mop right now to clean it up, right? They're going to say, hey, there's no way you didn't see that, right? There's no way you didn't notice that before you walked through it and slipped. And if you didn't, you weren't paying attention. Yeah. So that's an open and obvious defense. Yeah. Another one is notice. And the classic example of this is, if I make a spill and then I slip in it, there's no way the store would have known, right? And that's also contributory negligence you were talking about. But if something has been on the ground for 2 seconds, there's no way the store would have noticed that, hey, there's a spill, there's a dangerous condition, we need to clean it up. So notice is a big one. That one obviously goes very broad, right? So, earlier you mentioned the golf case, which I know you loved researching that case. Went out, played many rounds.
That's right. That's right. Just to make sure.
If the golf course did not know that their system was down, there's no notice. There's no way they could have, or maybe they should have known. Right. But yeah.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, people ask me at times, well, I mean, what are we supposed to do? We're just a small mom and pop business. I'm like, look, we're not after the mom and pop businesses that are doing it the right way, but use common sense. Like, if you're inviting people onto your premises and you're aware that there is an issue on the floor, there's an issue with a hot stove, there's a potential fire hazard, whatever, your bathrooms are in a bad condition, let people know and just simply say, hey, look, be aware of this when you come on these premises. We're working on it. Don't quit on us, but we're working on it. Those are common sense things people can do to insulate themselves from a lot of these claims if they're just wise and smart. You've done a fabulous job. And I just want to tell you, that we're rooting for you, and I know you landed at an incredible place. I know the ownership and the partners of your law firm, and they're not only really great lawyers, they're really good people, and so you did a good job. So even though you landed away from us, we're proud of you. Great job. And so glad you've been on.
Of course.
And he is Jake Norwood, Josh Wright. On behalf of them, thank you so much for joining us. Those are legal rock stars right there. That's why you watch this show. And we hope you do the same thing next week, same place, same time, for another edition of The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.